On May 14, 2018, at 3:47 p.m., Kendrick and Tiffany Walker's lives changed forever. The couple, residents of the Brightmoor neighborhood in northwestern Detroit. Kendrick Walker, 34, worked as a construction foreman at Miller Construction, Inc., overseeing residential development projects throughout Wayne County. His wife, Tiffany, 32, taught mathematics at Cody High School, where she had been employed for the past 7 years. The Walkers had settled into a neighborhood that was experiencing increasing tension between rival criminal organizations. The Crimson Kings and the Black Hand Gang had been fighting over territory for distribution points of illegal substances since early 2017, with violence escalating throughout the first half of the year months of 2018. According to police reports filed by the Detroit Police Department's 8th Precinct, Tiffany Walker left Cody High School at approximately 3:15 p.m. on that Monday afternoon. Her regular route home took her past the intersection of Fenkel Avenue and Evergreen Road, where a corner store served as a disputed territory between the gangs. At 3:42 p.m., members of the Crimson Kings, led by Marcus Red Johnson, arrived at the location to confront Black Hand associates who had been selling prohibited substances in what they considered their territory. Police investigators later determined that Jason Big J Wilson, a lieutenant in the Black Hand organization, ordered his men to stand their ground when confronted. The resulting confrontation escalated rapidly. According to witness testimonies collected by Detective Sarah Martinez, at least 7 armed individuals were present when the first shots were fired at 3:45 p.m. Ballistic evidence recovered from the scene indicated that more than 36 rounds were discharged from 5 different weapons during the 2-minute exchange. Tiffany Walker's silver 2015 Toyota Camry was passing through the intersection when the gunfire erupted. 2 9mm rounds penetrated the driver's side door and struck her in the torso. First responders arrived at 3:52 p.m., but emergency medical technician Robert Dawson pronounced her dead at the scene at 4:01 p.m. For Kendrick Walker, the news delivered by officers Michael Collins and Jamal Washington at his workplace at 4:37 p.m. marked the beginning of a dark transformation. Phone records obtained during the subsequent investigation showed that Kendrick made 17 calls in the following 48 hours. The final call, to his brother-in-law Thomas Grant, lasted 42 minutes. During this conversation, Kendrick expressed fear for his own safety, stating that he had received an anonymous call warning him to stay out of it. 3 weeks after Tiffany's funeral, which was held at Greater Faith Baptist Church on May 20, 2018, Kendrick began formulating his plan. Bank records show he withdrew $23,700 from the couple's joint savings account on June 5. On the same day, he purchased a prepaid mobile phone from a convenience store on 8 Mile Road, and according to recovered GPS data, he traveled to Toledo, Ohio, where he paid cash for a 2003 Chevrolet Impala, with a severely damaged title from a private seller named Eduardo Vasquez. The investigation revealed that Kendrick then spent the next 8 days methodically preparing his disappearance. He purchased camping equipment, non-perishable food supplies, and a comprehensive first aid kit from various stores across Michigan and northern Ohio. Computer records recovered from his laptop showed searches for "how to disappear completely," "changing identity after death," and "staged car accidents." On June 14, 2018, exactly 1 month after his wife's murder, Kendrick Walker executed his plan. He was last seen by his neighbor, Mrs. Eleanor Jenkins, leaving his home at approximately 10:15 p.m. At 11:42 p.m., emergency services received a call about a vehicle fire on a remote road near Lake St. Clair. The severely burned Chevrolet Impala was registered to Kendrick Walker. Though no remains were initially found, blood samples matching Kendrick's type were discovered on the driver's seat. Due to the department's heavy caseload and the seemingly straightforward evidence, the Wayne County Medical Examiner's Office declared Kendrick Walker deceased on June 17, 2018. The case was closed with the presumption that the bereaved husband had taken his own life following his wife's tragic murder. What investigators didn't know at the time was that Kendrick Walker was very much alive. Using a false identity purchased from a counterfeiter in Dearborn for $15,000, he had transformed himself into Michael Carter, a drifter with no ties or history. The preparation for Kendrick Walker's disappearance began on June 6, 2018, when he contacted Ray Simmons, a mechanic with known connections to local chop shops. Phone records indicate 5 calls between Kendrick and Simmons over a 48-hour period. According to later testimony from Simmons, Kendrick paid $4,000 in cash to purchase a damaged 2003 Chevrolet Impala with no questions asked. Surveillance footage from a hardware store in Roseville showed Kendrick purchasing accelerants, wire cutters, and electrical tape on June 9. That same day, he visited 3 different pharmacies across Macomb County, buying medical supplies including disinfectant, bandages, and prescription-strength painkillers from an underground supplier identified only as Marcos in text messages recovered from his prepaid phone. The detailed plan Kendrick developed was found later in encrypted files on a USB drive hidden in the air vent of his brother-in-law's garage. On June 12, Kendrick visited the Michigan Secretary of State office in Sterling Heights and obtained a replacement driver's license, claiming his original had been stolen. Security camera footage showed him leaving with the new identification. That evening, he met with a document forger known in criminal circles as the Professor, paying $15,000 for a complete identity package under the name Michael Carter, including a Social Security card, birth certificate, and driver's license from Illinois. By June 14, Kendrick had methodically withdrawn all his remaining funds from 3 separate accounts, totaling $41,872. He purchased a used Ford F-150 pickup truck for $8,500 cash from a private seller in Port Huron, who later told investigators he remembered Kendrick only as a quiet guy who seemed in a hurry. At 10:15 p.m. on June 14, Kendrick's neighbor Eleanor Jenkins observed him loading duffel bags into his regular vehicle, a 2016 Honda Accord. In her statement to police, Jenkins noted that Kendrick seemed nervous but determined, and that he waved to her in what she later described as a final goodbye. The execution of Kendrick's plan began at 11:20 p.m., when he drove the Chevrolet Impala to Crawford Road, a secluded area approximately 12 miles from his home. Cell tower data placed his prepaid phone at this location for 22 minutes. During this time, Kendrick strategically placed his personal items in the vehicle, including his wallet containing identification, family photos, and credit cards. According to the arson investigation report, Kendrick used a combination of gasoline and household chemicals to create an intense fire that would destroy most evidence. Before igniting the vehicle, he left blood samples on the driver's seat and dashboard, which DNA analysis would later confirm as his own. The investigation determined he had previously drawn and preserved his own blood for this purpose. At 11:42 p.m., an anonymous call to emergency services reported a vehicle fire on Crawford Road. The caller, using a voice disguiser later found among Kendrick's online purchases, reported seeing a car veer off the road and explode. By the time first responders arrived at 11:57 p.m., the Chevrolet Impala was fully engulfed in flames. Firefighter Larry Lorenzo, first on the scene, reported that the intensity of the fire made immediate intervention impossible. By 12:30 a.m. on June 15th, when the fire was finally extinguished, the vehicle was almost completely destroyed. Due to the extent of the damage and the presence of Kendrick's personal effects and blood samples, responding officers initially reported the incident as a fatal accident. Detective Laura Holt, assigned to the case, noted inconsistencies including the absence of skid marks and the unusual burn pattern. However, with department resources stretched thin due to a 27% increase in violent crimes that month, and the presumption that this was a suicide following Tiffany Walker's murder, the investigation was not prioritized. On June 17, 2018, the Wayne County Medical Examiner's Office officially declared Kendrick Walker deceased based on circumstantial evidence. The death certificate listed the cause as accidental death due to vehicle fire. Meanwhile, Kendrick Walker, now living as Michael Carter, had already traveled to Chicago. Hotel records show a Michael Carter checked into the Red Roof Inn on South Columbus Drive on June 15th, paying cash for a 5-night stay. Security footage showed a man wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses, who matched Kendrick's height and build, but with significantly altered appearance. He had shaved his head, grown a beard, and was wearing glasses. From his hotel room, Kendrick began the systematic process of tracking the men responsible for his wife's death. Internet search history recovered much later showed him accessing social media profiles of known Crimson Kings and Black Hand members, particularly focusing on Marcus Red Johnson and Jason Big J Wilson. Following the staged death, Kendrick Walker, now living as Michael Carter, recognized that to find those responsible for Tiffany's death, he would need to infiltrate the criminal underworld. His first target, gaining access to the networks connected to both the Crimson Kings and the Black Hand. On July 3, 2018, surveillance footage from a bar called the Rusty Nail on Detroit's west side captured Michael Carter's first deliberate contact with known criminal associates. According to statements later collected by FBI agent Marcus Dawson, Carter approached Darius Phillips, a low-level associate of the Crimson Kings, offering his services as someone with nothing to lose. Phillips initially dismissed Carter but reconsidered after witnessing Carter efficiently handle an altercation with two intoxicated patrons who had become aggressive toward one of the waitresses. Phillips offered Carter a position as security at several establishments where prohibited substances were sold, paying $200 per night. Over the following weeks, Carter established a reputation for reliability and discretion. His background check, run through compromised police department access by Calvin Green, a corrupted records clerk, showed a minor criminal history for Michael Carter, identically matching the false records Kendrick had purchased. By September 2018, Carter had advanced to transporting prohibited substances between distribution points across Detroit's northwest neighborhoods. Cell phone records indicate he received 43 calls from 6 different numbers associated with Crimson King's operatives during this period. GPS data from vehicles he was known to drive showed regular patterns consistent with distribution routes mapped in DEA investigations. On October 12, 2018, a significant breakthrough occurred when Carter prevented the theft of a substantial amount of money during an attempted robbery at a stash house on Livernois Avenue. According to testimony from Leon Jackson, a Crimson Kings lieutenant, Carter single-handedly subdued 3 armed robbers, recovered all stolen cash, and demonstrated exceptional calm under pressure. This incident earned Carter a meeting with Marcus Red Johnson on October 15, 2018. Security camera footage from the Platinum Lounge showed the two men speaking privately for approximately 47 minutes. Partial audio recovered from the establishment's security system revealed discussion about expanding operations, and Johnson expressing approval of Carter's professional approach. By December 2018, Carter had developed a reputation that crossed gang lines. Several Black Hand members had approached him about potentially switching allegiances, attracted by his apparent lack of emotional investment and purely business-oriented approach. On January 23, 2019, Carter engineered his first direct contact with the Black Hand organization by deliberately delivering a shipment to a disputed territory. The confrontation that followed was recorded on a security camera at a nearby gas station. The footage showed Carter calmly negotiating with 3 Black Hand members, offering to provide information about Crimson King's operations in exchange for a meeting with higher-ranking members. This calculated betrayal resulted in a meeting with Jason Big J Wilson on February 2, 2019. According to an informant later identified as Terrell Washington, Wilson initially suspected Carter was attempting to infiltrate the Black Hand. A thorough background check and physical search for recording devices preceded their conversation. During their meeting at an abandoned warehouse on Detroit's east side, Carter presented detailed information about Crimson King's supply chains as proof of his potential value. Wilson, though skeptical, assigned Carter to work under his lieutenant, Eric Stone Thompson, with instructions to monitor Carter's activities closely. Over the following months, Carter methodically built trust within the Black Hand organization, while gathering intelligence on the key figures involved in the shootout that killed Tiffany. His phone records showed increasing communication with Wilson's inner circle, and multiple witnesses reported seeing Carter at high-level meetings by May 2019. On June 8, 2019, Carter executed a carefully planned operation targeting a gathering of Wilson's lieutenants at a secluded property in northern Oakland County. Using skills acquired during his months in the criminal world, he neutralized the security detail and confronted 5 high-ranking Black Hand members who had been present during the fatal shootout. Forensic evidence later recovered from the scene indicated Carter used a combination of non-lethal techniques and strategic positioning to subdue everyone except Wilson. Recovered audio recordings from Carter's phone revealed his questioning of Wilson about specific details of the May 14, 2018 shootout, followed by Wilson's confession that he had ordered his men to shoot, regardless of who was in the crossfire. Despite having Wilson at his mercy, surveillance footage from a neighboring property showed Carter leaving the scene with Wilson still alive but restrained. A notebook recovered from Carter's temporary residence contained detailed information about the hierarchy of both gangs, with 7 names specifically highlighted. Individuals directly involved in the gunfire that killed Tiffany. What investigators would later discover was that Carter hadn't spared Wilson out of mercy, but because he intended to use him to access the remaining individuals on his list. By late March 2023, Kendrick Walker, now known in Detroit's criminal circles as Michael "Ghost" Carter, had established sufficient connections within the city's underworld. Through a network of informants, he had discovered that Tommy Smiths, a 45-year-old Boston native, controlled the entire drug distribution network in the Brightmoor district. Smiths ran his empire from the Blue Moon Club on Grand River Avenue, a seemingly respectable establishment that served as a front for his illegal operations. His reputation for being calculating and methodical had earned him the nickname Ghost, a moniker that would prove ironically appropriate given his true identity. On April 15, 2023, Kendrick orchestrated a meeting with Smiths in his private office on the club's 2nd floor. The pretext was discussing a new distribution scheme for Detroit's West Side, but Kendrick had spent weeks preparing for this moment. He'd studied every exit route from the building and, more importantly, had managed to turn 2 of Smiths's guards, the Rodriguez brothers, recent immigrants from Mexico who had grown disillusioned with their boss's increasing violence. According to later testimony from the Rodriguez brothers during police interrogation, the meeting began at approximately 11:40 p.m. Smiths was described as being dressed in an expensive Brioni suit, sitting in his leather chair and drinking scotch. The office was expensively furnished, with art on the walls and a large mahogany desk. Based on subsequent police interviews with Smiths and partial security camera footage recovered from the club, the confrontation began after the bodyguards left the room. Investigators believe this was when Kendrick revealed his true identity, by removing his disguise. The exact words exchanged between the 2 men remain uncertain, though both the Rodriguez brothers and Smiths later testified that Kendrick mentioned his wife's death at Henry Ford High School and the shooting at Joy Road and Hubbard Street. According to Smiths's testimony, he attempted to negotiate with Kendrick, offering substantial sums of money and trying to explain that Tiffany's death had been unintentional. The exact amounts offered and specific details of their conversation vary between different witness accounts. What happened next was pieced together from various sources, including security camera footage, witness statements, and later confessions. With the help of the Rodriguez brothers, Kendrick transported Smiths to the abandoned Packard plant on the city's outskirts. For approximately 48 hours, Smiths was held captive in the sprawling ruins of the former automotive factory. During subsequent police interrogations, Smiths revealed that during his captivity, he was forced to listen to recordings and view evidence related to Tiffany's death. Under pressure, he disclosed detailed information about his operation, including the involvement of other high-ranking criminals in the territory war with the Rivera gang. While the exact nature of what transpired during those 2 days remains partially unknown, medical records confirm that Smiths was found alive but severely traumatized. The psychological impact of his captivity was evident in his subsequent behavior and statements to law enforcement. This encounter proved crucial to the investigation, as it led to the discovery of broader criminal networks operating in Detroit. The information extracted from Smiths during his captivity would later become vital evidence in multiple criminal cases, though some details remain disputed or unverified to this day. The true extent of what was said and done during those 48 hours at the Packard plant may never be fully known, as accounts vary between witnesses and some details remain contested in official records. By early May 2023, Kendrick Walker's quest for vengeance had taken an unexpected turn. Police records and later testimonies reveal that he began systematically targeting the upper echelons of Detroit's criminal hierarchy, though not through violence as before. According to Detective Maria Rodriguez, who later led the investigation, Walker, still operating as Michael "Ghost" Carter, orchestrated a series of sophisticated sting operations. His first major move targeted Raymond "Ray" DeLuca, a 52-year-old veteran crime boss who controlled most of the illegal gambling operations in Detroit's eastern districts. On May 12, 2023, Walker manipulated information that led to a major drug bust at the Highland Park warehouse, resulting in the arrest of DeLuca and 3 of his top lieutenants. The operation yielded over $3 million in drugs and cash. Police reports indicate that an anonymous source, later confirmed to be Walker, had provided crucial intelligence about the timing and location of the shipment. Following this success, Walker turned his attention to the Rivera organization. Using contacts established during his time undercover, he began feeding information to both law enforcement and rival gangs. Between May and June 2023, his actions led to the arrest of Carlos Rivera Jr., heir to the Rivera crime family, on weapons trafficking charges. The operation also resulted in the seizure of $5.2 million in drug money from a safety deposit box at First National Bank, the exposure of 3 corrupt police officers working for the syndicate, and the discovery of a major money laundering operation running through several downtown Detroit businesses. Detective Rodriguez's case files note that Walker's methods became increasingly sophisticated. He would often arrange for rival gangs to intersect during major deals, ensuring police were nearby to make arrests when violence erupted. This strategy led to minimal civilian casualties while maximizing the impact on criminal operations. By late June 2023, Walker had helped dismantle significant portions of both the Smiths and Rivera organizations. However, FBI records indicate that the psychological toll of his actions was becoming evident. In surveillance footage from this period, witnesses described him as increasingly withdrawn and showing signs of severe emotional distress. The turning point came on July 3, 2023. Rather than executing his planned final move against Smith's remaining operation, Walker walked into the Detroit Police Department's 4th Precinct. According to the desk sergeant's report, he identified himself as Kendrick Walker and surrendered to authorities. This sudden surrender shocked both law enforcement and criminal organizations. In his initial confession, Walker provided detailed information about his activities over the previous 10 months, including evidence that would help prosecute over 24 high-ranking criminals. During his first formal police interview with Detective Rodriguez, Walker revealed how hollow his quest for vengeance had left him, explaining that destroying their criminal empire had done nothing to ease his pain or bring back Tiffany. The implementation of Walker's strategy had succeeded in severely crippling Detroit's major crime syndicates. Federal prosecutors would later use his testimony and collected evidence to secure convictions against 27 major crime figures, including Tommy Smiths. The case files would reveal that Walker had meticulously documented every illegal operation he encountered, creating an unprecedented map of Detroit's criminal underground. Yet the personal cost of his campaign was evident. Psychological evaluations conducted after his surrender indicated severe trauma and depression. The man who had orchestrated one of the most effective takedowns of organized crime in Detroit's history had lost himself in the process. The trial of Kendrick Walker began on September 15, 2023, at the Wayne County Circuit Court in Detroit. Lead prosecutor Michael Bennett presented a lengthy list of charges, including multiple counts of kidnapping, assault, conspiracy, and involvement in organized crime. The prosecution's 47-page indictment detailed Walker's transformation from a respected construction foreman to a calculated infiltrator of Detroit's criminal underground. The courtroom, Honorable Judge William Harrison presiding, was filled to capacity each day with media representatives, law enforcement officials, and members of the public captivated by the story of a grieving husband's descent into vigilantism. The trial, which lasted 6 weeks, became one of the most high-profile cases in Detroit's recent history. Defense attorney James Morrison, a veteran criminal defense lawyer with over 30 years of experience in high-stakes cases, built his defense around Walker's mental state following the murder of his wife. Morrison brought in expert witnesses including Dr. Rebecca Chen, a trauma specialist from the University of Michigan, who testified about the severe psychological impact of witnessing a spouse's violent death. The defense team presented evidence of Walker's previously spotless record, including commendations from his construction company and testimonials from Tiffany's former students at Henry Ford High School. During the proceedings, the court heard dramatic testimony from Tommy Smiths, who described in detail his 48-hour captivity at the abandoned Packard plant. His testimony painted a picture of psychological torture rather than physical violence, describing how Walker had forced him to confront the human cost of his criminal enterprise. The Rodriguez brothers, Manuel and Carlos, also testified, providing crucial details about Walker's transformation from grieving husband to calculated vigilante. Their testimony revealed how Walker had systematically infiltrated Detroit's criminal underground while maintaining his cover as Michael Carter. On October 20, 2023, Walker took the stand. His testimony lasted 3 days, during which he methodically detailed his actions without seeking sympathy or justification. Court transcripts show that when asked about his motivations, Walker spoke of his wife's dedication to improving their community through education, contrasting sharply with how she died in senseless gang violence. He described in detail how he had planned his own death, including the purchase of the vehicle and the careful placement of evidence that would convince authorities of his demise. The prosecution's key witness, Detective Maria Rodriguez, presented evidence of Walker's elaborate planning and execution of various operations. She detailed how his actions, while ultimately beneficial to law enforcement, had involved numerous violations of state and federal law. Through surveillance footage, financial records, and witness testimonies, she demonstrated how Walker had orchestrated the downfall of several major criminal operations in Detroit. Perhaps the most compelling evidence came from Walker's personal journals, discovered in a storage unit rented under his alias. These writings revealed his struggle with the morality of his actions and his growing realization that revenge would not bring him peace. The journals also contained detailed information about criminal operations throughout Detroit, which would later prove invaluable to ongoing investigations. Judge Harrison delivered the verdict on October 27, 2023. Despite the defense's arguments about diminished capacity due to trauma, the evidence of premeditation was overwhelming. In his closing remarks, Judge Harrison acknowledged the unique circumstances of the case and Walker's indirect contribution to law enforcement, but emphasized that vigilante justice could not be condoned in a society governed by law. Walker was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole at the Michigan State Penitentiary. The sentence reflected both the severity of his crimes and the calculated nature of his vigilante campaign. Court records note that when the sentence was pronounced, Walker remained stoic, showing no visible reaction to his fate. The only person present from his family was his younger sister, Catherine Walker, who had believed him dead for nearly a year. Local news coverage captured her emotional response to seeing her brother led away in handcuffs, a stark contrast to Walker's composed demeanor. In an unusual scene following the sentencing, several of Tiffany's former students and their parents were present in the gallery. Many had written letters to the court describing Tiffany's positive influence on their lives and expressing their complex feelings about her husband's actions. These letters would later be sealed as part of the court record. The case concluded with Walker's transfer to maximum security, where he would begin serving his sentence among many of the criminals he had helped put behind bars. His case would later become required study material at the Detroit Police Academy, serving as a complex example of how personal tragedy can drive ordinary citizens to take the law into their own hands, regardless of the ultimate cost to themselves. As a footnote to the trial, the evidence Walker gathered during his vigilante campaign continued to yield results long after his imprisonment. Over the next 2 years, federal prosecutors would use his detailed records to secure convictions against dozens of additional criminal figures, effectively restructuring the landscape of organized crime in Detroit.